IHF nations across the globe are currently making their selections for the 2024 World Juniors. Team Canada has in their selection pool 4 players from my local team, the Halifax Mooseheads. So I thought it was time to catch up with the herd. So today I've got for you guys a brand new Mooseheads video. For those who haven't seen them in the past, I cover the Halifax Mooseheads pretty extensively on the channel, but based on your feedback, really, these videos are honestly as much about the experience of going to see a game as the actual game and team itself. I'll put some timestamps on screen if you want to jump around, because I will be leaning pretty heavily into the vlog style, narrative style of this video. So if you don't care what we did before, during, and after the game and just want the hockey, well, you can see the timestamps on screen. With that being said, though, let's roll the intro. Alright, so as you can probably tell by some of the footage I captured, I've been sitting on this for a bit now. The game we saw was on Saturday, November 11th, and it saw Halifax host Shawinigan. I really wanted to make an event out of this game, as it was the first one that I was seeing this season with Brandon, so we decided to start off at one of our favorite pre-game restaurants over on the Dartmouth side, and that is Side Hustle Snack Bar. By the way, I've said this before, if you're a local Dartmouth or Halifax restaurant, you'd like to be featured in one of our videos, my email is down in the description. And if you are local and you decide to check out one of these restaurants or know one, let us know. Side Hustle is great not only for its atmosphere, it's right downtown Dartmouth, which is actually really nice now, but also its drink selection and its food. I got basically the fries version of a Big Mac. Brandon got their famous smash burger. Dartmouth is a great place to start because you can take the ferry across to Halifax and walk up the hill towards the Citadel, which will take you to where the Mooseheads play, Scotia Bank Arena. We were early, so on our way there, we were looking for somewhere else to stop pre-game, get a couple beers in. Initially, we were thinking the Midtown. That's pretty much the official bar of the Mooseheads, but way too packed, you can see as we walked by. So instead, we stopped in at the Press Gang. Pretty classic upscale Halifax bar in one of those historic buildings which are everywhere downtown if they weren't destroyed by the Halifax explosion. We did whiskey tasters, which, you know, I'm a whiskey guy, but I don't have a refined palate. Then we headed out, back up the hill, and hit the Scotiabank Center to start the game. I'll continue the story later, but let's talk a bit about the context, why this game was important. The big story going into it was not only the dominant season the Mooseheads had been having, but the unbelievable play of one player in particular, Jordan Dumais. Now, don't get me wrong, there are several standouts on the Halifax Mooseheads right now. 4 players were invited to the Team Canada World Juniors camp. That includes Jake Furlong, give him a special shout out as he is local, as well as Jordan Dumais, Marcus Vidicek, and Mathis Rousseau. Mathis Rousseau will probably be the starting goaltender for Team Canada, I imagine. He's just so sound. I heard an interview with the Mooseheads PR guy on the radio today. He said Rousseau hasn't been pulled, I believe, in his whole career. It may have just been the past 2 years. Honestly, it may be somewhat of a detriment to the Mooseheads. He's so solid that they are irresponsible defensively sometimes. But the other standout, and the bigger story for today's video, is Jordan Dumais. So the Mooseheads were buzzing early on in the season, but then Jordan Dumais came back. He had been at Columbus Blue Jackets camp, and given that he's still too young to go to the AHL, returned to the Mooseheads. Since then, in 21 games, he's now put up 47 points, which is fairly remarkable. But the big story going into the game that we saw was that he was on the precipice of getting the Mooseheads all-time scoring record. Spoiler alert, he wouldn't get the record, he would tie it, the record would be his next game, but what he's doing is pretty impressive, and I do wonder whether he will find a spot in the NHL. The biggest knock against him is his size. Dumais listed at 5'8", 169, but I mean, we're in an era in the NHL where talent can make up for a lack of physicality. If he does develop, he'll be a steal for the Columbus Blue Jackets, who got him 96th overall in 2022. What will be interesting to me is how the Mooseheads do if they lose a bunch of players to the World Junior Championships. I think it's almost a given that Rousseau is gone. I think Jordan Dumais will most likely be gone, and to be honest, I think Vidicek and even and Jake Furlong could all make the team. You could argue that there were even players left out of the tryout process. The Mooseheads had a phenomenal start to the season. For quite a while, they were number 1 in CHL power rankings. They were at the time that I saw the game. They've dropped now down to 7. They had a tough road trip, including losing a couple after the 4 players left to World Juniors camp, but safe to say they'll be in the contention for both the QMJHL and hopefully CHL championships. I do wonder, like, to what degree the players who anticipate going to World Junior camp start to slow it down in early December. If you're not Canadian watching this video, you probably don't understand how big a deal the World Juniors are here, but for many families, especially hockey families, my family, it's a tradition to watch the World Juniors, and to play in them would be a dream come true. As for the actual game itself, this one, like a lot of the Mooseheads games I've seen over the past couple of years, was never really in doubt. The team was buzzing early on. Dumais almost had an assist on the period 1 power play. He would get an assist on a goal that was later called back, and despite what I said, both teams would actually go into the third tied 1-1, though I thought the Mooseheads looked dominant and were ready to explode. In the third, the Mooseheads would simply outskate Shawinigan on a goal that would make it 2-1. Jake Furlong would then throw one on net, which would be redirected by Logan Crosby. Then Dumais would set up a short-handed goal, giving him the tie for all-time Moosehead points with 303. This is a record that stood for 20 years. The record had been held by Brandon Benedict, who played with the Mooseheads from the 98-99 season to the 02-03 season. To actually get the record, it's kind of difficult because you obviously have to be an incredibly skilled player, but you have to have spent as much time as possible in the CHL. Anyway, as you can probably tell based on these clips, the crowd was raucous. It was a full barn. It was also 90s night, which was awesome. Unfortunately, they didn't have, at that point, their new throwback jerseys, which they've recently released. These are so cool, I might actually have to buy one for myself. I'm not a big jersey guy, but I really like these. Anyway, when we go to the games, we usually spend a period up in the press box, but to be honest, it's a bit stuffy up there. I mean, it's a working place. There's scouts, there's media, there's players, and I go to these games as press, not just to, watch the games, but also, I think more interestingly, to record the experience. So usually at some point, we'll leave the press box and spend more of the time along the concourse, and again, it's so fun to be in Halifax when the Mooseheads are good. Brandon and I'd say accidentally sort of got after it that night. After the game, we headed out to the Loose Cannon. It's one of my favorite places to go in the city after a Mooseheads game. It's on Argyle, so still a busy, lively part of downtown. Often Argyle is converted to pedestrian only. That's a ton of fun, especially in the summer, but it's usually a bit on the quieter end, which to be honest means you can find a table or a bar stool to sit at. I've been noticing that more and more of the game crowd is headed there afterwards. That was even the case during the World Juniors, but while we were there, we ran into a couple of friends that we played high school football with, and the night sort of got out of hand, not in a bad way by any means. We went to Your Father's Mustache. We did the classic pizza corner, although we got Indian food, and I mean, overall, just a phenomenal night. And of course, the highlight being the Mooseheads with the 4-1 victory. But that's all for me today. Let me know, have you been to any Mooseheads games this season? Have you watched any local hockey of whatever type? I look forward to reading all of your comments as well as your feedback and thoughts on the video down below.